Hi there, welcome to Kenshi, the Eldritch Hellscape Simulator, RTS game, open world survival, bankruptcy simulator, fun samurai fighting game. In this world, we will be starting a new adventure as the brave knights that are round and have a table. Arthur will be leading his bravest of warriors to end all of the corruption in the brutal world of Kenshi. And you get to sit here listening to all of my mildly insane ramblings. I hope you enjoy. Let's get into the tale of the knights who are round. The stories of Arthur and his knights that are round began in a ruined city with naught but a bar and walls filled with highwaymen and thieves. Arthur had his trusty men. Starving as they were, he was confident his men and lady could make it in this harsh land. After all, his knights were packing extra food stores. On day 1, his knights needed food, as well as to exercise, for they had let themselves go remarkably in their starvation. While Sir Prize snuck into the local hovels attempting to find food after getting approval from Arthur. They needed food. If they didn't obtain some, they would starve. Arthur hated that they were forced to resort to thievery, yet they could not end the suffering of this cruel world if they were crawling across the desert starving. Sir Prize spent many hours trying to learn the arts of sneaking, lockpicking, and thievery to keep his brethren alive. And after many hours, the lock that he was attempting to pick was picked, and Sir Prize learned that this house was a secret reconnaissance base for an evil holy nation. But at the moment, all Sir Prize could do was drool over the mass amount of food, money, and tradable goods he and his brethren could now sell at the local bar. He rushed to his friends and shared with them the bounty of his labors, as well as telling his great commander Arthur of the evil informant living somewhere in town. They talked for a while, and then decided to sell their goods and prepare for a journey to a new land, once they had recovered from starvation and trained their bodies for the journey, for they were not yet fighters. Our brave warriors spent most of their day training. They ran up and down the sprawling streets of the hub, running back and forth, hither and thither, being admired and insulted for their efforts, but slowly day turned to night, safety turned to danger, as Sir Arthur thought to himself, they needed more food, yet they lacked the funds to buy more than a few morsels. Far from enough to get them out of their great problem, starvation. And so, as the moon rose on day 2, they gathered at the gates of the hub and prepared to head to the local stronghold of the Shek Kingdom. It would be a hard journey, and they were unsure if all of them would survive, but they had more running to do, and they started running. Unfortunately, their training had not been enough, and soon they were set upon by a group of Sheks. But not from the great Shek Kingdom, but outcasts, just brigands with bigger swords. But they were far better warriors than the knights at present, and Arthur's brave warriors, who bought time for him and his comrade to escape, were swiftly crushed in combat. The lack of even a single sword between the group may have contributed to this, yet there was hope. They got away, and the fallen brethren were picked up and carried safely to the city. They were actually mauled by a wolf and left for dead. A kind Shek Kingdom warrior came by them on the road and healed their wounds, but they were still unconscious and exposed. Sir Prize awoke first from his coma. Yet his arm was too badly damaged, and he was incapable of carrying any of his fallen friends, so he ventured forth alone to the kingdom, hoping to find a place to recover, until he could come back to save his brethren. Not long after Sir Prize had left, unfortunately for his friends, both Lady Guenohair and the robust Circumference rose from their injuries. Hefting their friends onto their shoulders, they spotted the bodies of the wolves that had laid them low, and knew what to do. They harvested the meat and the hides from these vicious animals, so that the death of their fallen foes could allow them to live on and recover, and even profit from this harsh journey. And they went to find their stealthy friend, difficult as that may be, given his size. The heroes found their friend recovering at an inn in the great city of Squin. They placed their friends in the beds and climbed in themselves to rest, Circumference, however, took it upon himself to look after the group's interests by going to trade with the merchant, selling his furs he had acquired from those dastardly wolves, and then set out to the outskirts of the city, where he made a campfire and cooked his meats, so that his friends would have a decent meal for the first time in days when they recovered. Surprise awoke, and did what he did best, which was apparently using his great sneaky skills to pick locks through solid objects, a masterful technique taught to him by the great Merlin. He sought more food and goods for his fellow adventurers. The Lady Guinevere awoke and took a seat with Circumference, speaking with the locals about the harshness of their travels and the greatness of their victories. The travelers were not wanting to believe them. Who would have guessed? As the dawn rose on the third day, the group was still resting and recovering, all but Surprise, who was sneaking outside of a wall and stealing fish from a chest to feed to his friends. He wasn't very good at it, and it took many attempts and many times avoiding the guards looking for the thief. But he persisted, for the ability to steal through a great solid wall was truly his gift. He gained the fish, and some more meat, and shared it with the group. Now fully recovered and feasting like kings, they ventured out to find new ways of acquiring wealth and trading. As they set off, they saw a strange sight, battle in the streets of Squin. They helped the local authorities in carrying the gear and disarming these dangerous men. They also lured survivors of the attack back to Squin and continued helping. Now, they finally had some gear to help keep them alive, all due to the generosity of the Shek Kingdom. They ventured out in search of more bandits to borrow new gear and tradable goods from. They found none other than Hanabusa, a bandit wanted in these parts, with a bounty of 2,000 cats. So, Arthur had devised a plan. He had his men charge, then executed a feigned retreat back to the guards of Squin, where the bandit caught up and demanded payment, knowing the city guards wouldn't let this man get away with assault outside the gates of their great city. The guards rushed him. Lady Guinevere used her new crossbow to devastating effect on these villains, and it was clear the new gear had made the men stronger. The bandit was taken down, and the group had claimed their prize. Now all they had to do was heal him and hand him in. Simple. After claiming all of his goods and shiny sword, of course. And just like that, with more goods to sell and more cats than any of them had held before, the group was thrilled at this great turn of luck. Now they had the means to pay for lodging and food. They also decided, after their recent combat experience, they needed more training in strength. They sold their goods and rested, because day 4 would be a grueling time indeed. The remaining healthy members of the Noble Knights spent the day or so mining. For what purpose, only Arthur knew. This made the group nervous. But they pushed on, for their leader had only ever been wrong once or twice. On day 4, we did so many epic things, like mining, and also some more mining. We also found a small group of warriors with bounties, and you all know how this goes. We baited them into a Shek warrior, beat their unholy asses, and we handed them in for our paycheck. We now had 13,000 cats and were getting richer by the day, and also heavier. Why heavier? Because we were mining. At the beginning of day 5, the great Sir Arthur began his great plan, his training method. His men looked on in wonder and confusion as he carried 456 kilograms of weight on his back, while also carrying his very light friend Circumference. Arthur would not be caught lacking strength once again. He would gain strength, and then so too would his warriors. After almost an entire day of strength training with his super-secret, never-done-before method, Arthur's warriors wished to join in, and so Surprise picked up Lady Guinevere and began his own strength training with more iron and a backpack bought from the local travel goods store. Circumnavigate chose not to sit idle any longer and began sprinting back and forth to train his own skills in speed. He would need speed if he was to become the true navigator of the group. The great knight spent all 4 of the next days up to day 10 leveling strength and athletics. Sir Arthur reached level 30 in strength, a true Chad of the Knights of the Round. And at the start of day 7, Circumnavigate was now running at over 20 miles per hour with an athletic skill of 30. Things were coming together now for the rest of the warriors, and then, on the morning of day 11, they had done it. After 5.5 days of using Jake Paul's epic training regime, Sir Arthur and all of his knights, also Guinevere, achieved the 30 strength levels they had lacked, and now could begin the true grind of Kenshi. Epic combat. Arthur and his noble chubs went to the local trade establishment and sold the copious amounts of iron. They also bought some maps of the remnant Shek Kingdom. Then they set out from the great gates of Squin to find some live training dummies. They were feeling strong. And there they were. They found a group of the hungriest bandits, and Arthur led his men bravely into their first real fight. With absolutely no outside interference, they showed their dominance in martial prowess against some starving and barely standing, warriors of great skill. And a Shek showed up to announce our victory with his cheer squad. Later on that day, they encountered a group of wannabe ninjas, and Arthur knew exactly what to do. He led his men to the fight, knowing his brave warriors would easily lose. They lost hard, and yet the wannabe ninjas could not account for the element of surprise, who swept in, having waited in the shadows, and saved every member of the glorious Order of Round Knights, and Lady Guinevere. One by one he brought them to safety, bandaged their wounds, stopped bleeding, launched Circumference into the circumference of the atmosphere before allowing him to softly land. He's probably fine. Surprise nobly saved all the men, and no one suffered any long-term injuries, as he ferried them back to the beds at the Inn of Squin to recover from the fierce battle they totally tied in. They totally did never lose a battle, for they were the greatest of warriors. Sir Arthur arrived back at the inn shortly after, carrying his lady bold Guinevere to safety like a knight. In feces-stained armor, he ran through the gates to find his men well and resting aside from Circumnavigate, who appears to have lost an arm. Whoops, Arthur thought, as he would be more careful in future battles. As day 12 dawned, the warriors slept soundly through the night with no problems, while Arthur stood guard, vigil, determined and very well aware, protecting his men and his lady. Nobody lost limbs during this nap, aside from Lady Guinevere, who was feasted upon by the local robotic wildlife. Arthur, who had fallen asleep while standing perfectly still and definitely wasn't just playing cookie clicker on his phone. I'm sure no one will notice though, right? Yeah, so she died from blood loss, because we ran out of bandages. It was truly an unavoidable tragedy. The men all took turns paying their respects. The sister of their order, the only female that had ever looked at half of them, let alone spoke with them. Arthur quickly realized his mistake. He shattered the fourth wall and realized he hadn't lowered his dismemberment setting from his past life, and his friends had paid the price. They swiftly went back to bed, resting beside their fallen comrade, for they still had not regained their former strength. Day 13, they would set out for new frontiers. They healed up, ran out of town, found a band of starving refugees, and lured them to a group of giga-strong guards, as that was the lawful thing to do. They then proceeded to pillage them for all they were worth, because money! On day 13, we fought more bandits. We also had a great duel, where we had an epic fair 1 versus 1 with a Shek warrior and his large muscles, and defeated him. We also brought him back with us to the hub, for Arthur had a plan to improve their strength. He would venture to a nearby training master, and he would buy training weapons. Not much good for actual combat, but in the hands of this Shek would create the ultimate training dummy. Arthur was sure this violated some kind of law of the Geneva variety, but this man just tried to jump him, so that gave him justification, he believed. Anyways, They brought their first house, a longhouse in the hub, where they could train in peace. Now they just needed money, and Arthur knew just the guy to get it. And so, Circumference sat in the corner of the inn, inconspicuous. No one could see him, or the large man's butt over his shoulder, at which his eyes seemed magnetically drawn. However, this chapter is a solo arc. That's right, it's time for the Naruto training arc, in which Surprise will sprint to a dangerous place on the map, rob it blind, and run all the way home, hopefully by the 15th day. Off he goes. He crossed harsh environments, for there was truly no mountain high enough, no river low enough, to keep him from stealing you, baby. He passed through the settlement known as the Holy Mines, and holy they were, for they immediately realized Surprise was in fact not an underage boy, and promptly chased him out of the camp. Onwards he went. He soon came to a large blackened landscape where lightning smashed the ground around him, and he was met with harsh and heavy acid rains, but even this did not stop him. As he made it to his destination, the great black desert, he then rested until later that night, the hour of the fox, when he could move more slyly with his perfect frame. This is when he learned that robots don't sleep, so he decided on a different approach. His great skills in thievery had granted him access to the dark arts taught by the great wizard and trickster Merlin long before they set off. He would freeze time and take this robot for everything he was worth, and just like that, we had been caught. Yet they didn't take the goods off of our sly fox. They simply dumped him in the acid rain, expecting something as simple as acid to destroy this man. Yet he was too thick, and could resist just long enough to leg it. But if he was to make it home, he'd need to heal, and that he did. He slept off his concussion, lacking the bandages, before making his long run home with many loots he had obtained. As day 14 loomed, the hero had returned to his friends with over 20,000 cats worth of trade goods and skeleton parts in his bag. Don't ask me where he put them, but apparently he could fit them. That must have been another one of the many tricks taught to him by Merlin. They could now build a home and start training for realsies. Well, it turned out the Shek warrior died while we were out in our spirit quest for money, and we didn't have enough building materials to finish our house. Okay, we're going to have to go for a run. After another quick run, buying the materials we needed for our house, and now our brave band forms the great human centipede for maximum efficiency. Likely more of that dark wizardry learned by Merlin. And so the house was finished, and we had survived our first 15 days in Kenshi. As the Order of the Knights that are round, led by Arthur, they looked over the kingdom that would one day be theirs to protect, eager and anxious for what awaited them on their next adventure. Alright everybody, that was the end of our first 15 days of Kenshi. We will be doing these in 15-day parts. These are going to take a lot more effort to edit down and create than my normal content. If you enjoyed it, please drop a like, comment, subscribe if you're new here. We would love to have you join the community. We'll be doing this series up to 100 days and potentially beyond, depending on how long it takes me to get this done. As you can tell, I'm not good at this video game. Bye for now, my friends. Not forever.